Hello and welcome to an India Today special broadcast. I'm Gaurav Sawant. There is major escalation in tension between Israel and Hamas, and now Hezbollah has jumped straight into this battle. Let's quickly listen in to the main points. Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah chief, he spoke today. He said the Hamas war against Israel was actually a holy war. He said this October 7 attack on Israel, which he called was the Al-Aqsa typhoon, it's shaken Israel to the core. It's had a strategic impact. It's had a political, diplomatic, military and psychological impact on Israel. No longer is Israel considered infallible. But that's not all. He said this holy war will continue. He, of course, distanced the Hezbollah from this war, saying this was a Palestinian operation. This was planned entirely in Palestine. Nobody had any information about it, and that is what explains the success of the strike, in which 1,400 people were killed in Israel and several taken hostage. But he says this war against Israel will continue and has shaken the core of Israel. And that's not all. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also reacted. He's warned Lebanon not to get involved in Israel's war on Hamas, making it very clear there will be massive consequences for Beirut, for Lebanon, in case Hezbollah open the second front. While there is heightened tension and Hezbollah fighters have been targeting the Israeli forces, but it's restricted to one pocket in northern Israel. Israel has warned Lebanon against widening the arc of this conflict. Let's quickly listen in to Hassan Nasrallah and also to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
They set as top goal to annihilate Hamas, the whole of Hamas. Then, speaking of toppling the government of Hamas, then eliminating the leaders of Hamas, then the military wing of Hamas. Now they are claiming to have as a top goal to annihilate Hamas. And when they started to wake up, they now speak about another goal, to bring home the captives. Those who have had a long experience with different resistance factions in Palestine and Lebanon throughout history, have you seen at any point of time, the Israelis capable of releasing their captives without negotiations? Never. They falsely claimed that Hamas beheaded babies, and they failed to produce a single piece of evidence. Yet they remain silent against the images of thousands of babies and children torn apart in Gaza as a result of the Israeli missiles. Now all exposed, the whole West claiming and preaching about democracy, humanity, rule of law. It's nothing but hypocrisy. It is a lynch law. We are living in a jungle. We all must establish this fact. The United States is totally responsible for the war raging in Gaza against unarmed, defenseless people.
Our forces are working in all the arenas. Our will be loud and clear. Our enemies will be defeated, and we will not stop until victory and achieving all our goals. In the north, I say to our enemies, don't make a mistake. A mistake will cost you dearly.
And for more on the story, I quickly want to cut across to India Today's Shiv Arur, just back from the Gaza Strip, covering Israel's war on Hamas terror on ground zero. Shiv, what do you make of what Hassan Nasrallah said? Does this indicate that the arc of this war is actually widening, or is this a lot of talk as yet? Lebanon perhaps will weigh in very heavily and not let Hezbollah widen the scope of this battle, at least for now. Keep it restricted in one sector. the Americans are also getting involved in a bigger way. Shiv, take it away.
You know, Gaurav, this may have been a very highly anticipated speech by the Hezbollah chief, Hassan Nasrallah, but none of the things he said were beyond expectations at all. You know, he's talking about a holy war, a decisive war, you know, honoring the martyrs, as he calls them, of the Hamas, you know, calling this, you know, the river to the sea, you know, a war that has to end, you know, in favor of the Arab world. The destruction of Israel, the death of Zionism. You know, these are all the stock things that the Hezbollah and the Hamas have said for a very, very long time. Now, as a proxy of Iran, I think what most people were hoping to find clarity on from the Hezbollah chief was an indication of perhaps what the level of involvement will be, both by the Hezbollah as well as its mastermind sitting in Tehran, you know, the Iranian government and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. That has not been forthcoming at all, and I'm not surprised because usually in speeches of this kind, they serve more as you know, information warfare and messaging and mind games rather than, you know, providing any kind of a tactical blueprint as to how a country is going to escalate the situation. I did an interview with the Israeli ambassador who actually said he thinks it's unlikely that Iran will get involved in any direct way in this conflict. There is a possibility of an escalation from the Hezbollah side, which has already been happening, you know, whether it is anti-tank missiles and surface-to-air missiles on the Lebanon border, whether it is the Houthis, you know, attacking from Yemen, whether it is the Hamas continuing to receive Iranian support and weapons to continue to keep that offensive capacity against Israel. But Israel doesn't believe this is going to spill over into a larger conflict. The reason, of course, for that is the United States has deployed in a very big way in West Asia. That is something that Iran has, you know, received as a very, very real message. But it is going to continue to, you know, poke Israel, to test its responses, keep that pressure and a semblance of Israel being surrounded, as it were, by the Islamic world. But as far as Hassan Nasrallah is concerned, his job as a proxy of Iran is very clear, and I think that's what the Hezbollah is going to continue to do.
Shiv, many thanks for joining me. Keep tracking that story. I will come back to you for more on this developing story. And just a short while back, Shiv, Shweta Singh, Ashutosh Mishra and I had a conversation about the last 28 days of Israel's war on Hamas terror, how the India Today team covered this on Ground Zero, and how this war could now take a bigger form in the days and weeks ahead, entering a decisive phase as the Israeli forces now enter not just the Gaza Strip, but the Gaza city.
For a month, they reported.
इस समय इजराइल की सेना बहुत तेजी से आगे बढ़ रही है। एक तरफ आप ये टैंक देख रहे हैं जिनको फ्रंट लाइन पे लाया जा रहा है।
Witnessed Israel's nightmare firsthand.
You can hear explosions. There are rockets landing nearby, it looks like.
India saw it unfold via them.
ये चंद कदम की दूरी पर मैं हूँ इस समय। जो पीछे आपको फेंसिंग दिख रही है, ये वही फेंस है जो गाजा पट्टी को इजराइल से सेपरेट करती है। इसी के हिस्से तोड़ कर हमास के आतंकी यहाँ पर आए थे।
No one got closer to Gaza.
You can hear the siren played out again in Ashkelon. This is 5th attack since morning, and the moment siren heard, the first protocol is to evacuate. All of a sudden, loud noise, loud explosions heard here in Ashkelon again.
Most watched war reporters are back.
War reporters from the front see things that no camera can capture, because in a war, in an unfolding conflict of the kind that Shweta, Gaurav, Ashutosh and I have just seen over the last few weeks on the Israel-Gaza fault line, is something that no words perhaps can adequately convey. But we are here after reporting from a crisis that has consumed the entire world, and we thank you, the viewer, for watching us and respecting our coverage. The four of us have come together now to bring you aspects of what we saw that could not perhaps otherwise be reported. Thanks to all of you for joining me on this special show. There's been a great amount of demand by our viewers, Gaurav, Shweta and Ashutosh, for us to interact with our viewers, to tell them what our cameras couldn't capture. And we saw, I can tell you, viewer, some truly, truly terrible things. All four of us have spent weeks there. So I'm going to start by asking Gaurav, who was among the first journalists to reach there along with Ashutosh, what the worst thing he saw was. Gaurav, it's a difficult question, I know, but this is war. Most people in their lifetimes, thankfully, can never get close to a conflict. What is the worst thing that you saw there?
The destruction firsthand. We were amongst the first journalists to get to that Nova Music Festival site at Reem. The rotting bodies, unfortunately, and that's a very tough word to use, those bodies were still there. We saw those bodies. I saw those bodies. I saw bullet marks in that camp. I mean, that's where all the music lovers, youngsters, future generation of Israel, they'd come together, and that's where terrorists, they came on hang gliders, and they shot 300 of 3,000 who were there. So that was terrible. Going to kibbutz Biri, going to Nihal Oz, one of the first kibbutz that were targeted by terrorists at a time when the stench of that rotting flesh still there, cars burning still there. We got there on the 8th, and these were places we got to by 10th and 11th. So it was terrible being there, covering this war at a time when shelling was still happening in a terrible way. In Tel Aviv, you still have about a minute and a half to duck. In Sderot, where I was, you had less than 30 seconds. They were shelling. 30 seconds, you can't even find where the nearest bunker is. So you just lie flat on the ground next to a car or next to any structure that would protect your head and your body, Shiv.
Shweta, you and I traveled together to some of those kibbutzes. I remember the IDF soldiers asking us not to film certain things. But they didn't stop us from seeing those things. Yeah. Some of those things that you and I saw.
The blood on the floor. Remember that particular place where 3 babies were slaughtered. It pains when there are people who question you, why didn't you go to Gaza? So, okay, that's a different story about going to Gaza. The journalists who are in Gaza, who belong to that place, are covering that place. You cannot enter that area. But that does not stop you from questioning those people. Yeah. If you're looking at the babies of Gaza, how are you blind to a baby who's been put into a microwave and killed? Burnt to death, cooked to death rather. How are you blind to that 10-month-old baby who's been taken hostage? Shiv, the worst part of when I was present there, the one time when I actually felt really pained was when I saw the families that are sitting in Tel Aviv waiting for their loved ones. The weight in their eyes, the pain in their eyes, the mother of a 3-year-old who's asking me who will be changing his diapers, who's giving him milk.
I think the child aspect of what the four of us saw in Israel is absolutely horrifying, and I don't think those images will ever get out of our minds. And the four of us happen to be a part of a small group of journalists who saw some of that uncensored footage. Ashu, you also saw some of that footage, but apart from the footage, we also saw it up close. It's a different thing to see it up close. You also saw it, Ashu.
A toddler's shoe soaked with blood. Yeah. A back seat where perhaps the family was, trying to escape. Immediately they heard the firing taking place. But then a heavy caliber bullets literally penetrated the back seat, perhaps all around, those blood. That explains that the people, those Hamas group militants, whoever came, they did not even bother to see whether there are women. When there is an attack when the two nations fight, two groups fight, you attack an army, that's a war. You do not attack women and children, innocent people, but this is what is happening. So, of course, there have been casualties both the side, but remember who started first. Of course, there are people, innocent civilians who died in Gaza, but there are innocent civilians, women, children who have died in Israel. They have been killed, they were targeted. It was a pre-planned. They worked out for months to carry out this exercise, and it was in a planned way. They attacked the innocent civilians, women, elderly people, eliminated literally village after village, kibbutz after kibbutz in the bordering area.
One thing that I want to say repeatedly to all of our viewers, and this is something that has been acknowledged, is that the India Today group's reportage, India Today and Aaj Tak together, has been the most objective, most fair, most 360-degree Gaurav, you and I both reported from the Palestinian territories. So did you, Shweta. You were on the Jordan border. Ashu, you also visited the Palestinian territories. We showed all aspects of this war because we know as war reporters that in a war, there are no blacks and whites. There are many, many shades of grey. Gaurav, there was so much pressure, as Shweta said. Why aren't you going to Gaza? Why haven't you reporting from Gaza? It's not for a lack of trying. Many of us tried to go to Gaza, used every possible, procedure to try and somehow report from Gaza. How did you handle that? Because we did go and represent the Palestinian side to tell the world that this is a crisis. There are two sides, and we're showing you both.
And to the best of our ability. Given the fact that the Israelis control access to Gaza, they were not giving people access to Gaza, so you couldn't report from Gaza unless you lived there. And the moment we get an opportunity, perhaps we'd be amongst the first, Shweta, Shiv and Ashutosh.
And we're still trying.
And we're still trying. We will try and report from Gaza to the best of our ability the moment we get an opportunity. The point is, we went to the West Bank and went to the West Bank at a time when tensions were extremely high, when operations were being mounted, where that place was also being bombed, where people were being picked up. And we went into territory that we knew nothing about.
Yes.
Usually when you go into a difficult area, you always hope that you always plan an exit strategy. When we entered, when I entered at least, the West Bank, and when I reached Ramallah, I had no exit strategy. I did not know any local there. I just knew one journalist. Trusting that journalist, we got into that place. And, you could have been abducted. You could have been taken into some tunnel and hidden in a dungeon, and you wouldn't know what to do. One phone number in Shweta, if that stops working, you wouldn't know how to get out of that place.
My phone wasn't working there.
And your phone wasn't working.
I trusted my taxi driver.
So if I could add one worst experience, even being detained by the Israeli forces for 45 minutes, because I was around Mediterranean Sea, and that was the infiltration route via the sea route. They perhaps thought that there is some Hamas terrorist who's doing some activity trying to get in, and they detained for 45 minutes. So that was even...
And detentions became a part and parcel of what, the experience
there. You'd have strangers who put a gun to your head. I mean,
while you were reporting live.
While I was reporting live, I was on live television, and somebody just comes and puts a gun to your head and just says, who are you? Are you Hamas? Are you Hamas? Are you Palestinian? And then how do you deal with that situation? So you just handle it as calmly as you can. You take out your identity card. The Israeli army had given us an identity card. The Israeli government, that your foreign journalists covering.
Sometimes even that didn't work.
And sometimes that didn't work. I mean, such was the tension. And everyone's on tenterhooks. 1,400 people have been massacred. Rockets are falling every day. There is tension in the air. And no one trusts anyone. Because people think that there are people here who are guiding the bombs.
Absolutely. What Shweta, Gaurav, Ashutosh and I are basically trying to tell you viewers is that we happen to be there at a time of, historic fault lines between Israel and the Palestinian territories. Who knows whether this will lead to peace, the decimation of Hamas. What you're going to see coming up shortly is also an unfolding story about how Israel is trying to get India, a victim of terror, to also proscribe officially Hamas as a terror organization. Will that happen? We don't yet know, but I know for a fact that I speak on behalf of Shweta, Ashutosh, Gaurav and myself, that if we are sent back to the front lines, we will not hesitate. Even for a moment, we will see it as a privilege to bring and report that story to you firsthand.